Now, World War I was originally called the Great War. And they called it this because they truly believed there would never be another world war. It was so devastating. And so a lot of the old books and old memorabilia from this time, they call it the Great War. They don't call it World War One because they never thought there'd be a World War Two. Unfortunately, we know that there was. So World War One started with the Central Powers versus the Allied Powers. The Central Powers were Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, the Middle Eastern area, okay? And then the Allied Powers were Britain, France, and Russia. Eventually, U.S. and Italy are going to join the mix, and Russia's going to bail out for the Russian Revolution. It was an industrialized war. A lot more weaponry, a lot more technology, which unfortunately led to a whole lot more deaths. You had trench warfare, where they literally fought in holes. They dug long trenches along the front line. These trenches were hundreds of miles long. They were dug by hand and had a very high death rate. You could get trench foot, which is the lovely picture there on the side with the feet. And you could cause you to literally lose your foot. This particular picture, the guy had to have both his feet amputated. And the trenches were dirty and wet and not safe. You can see here, this is a map of a simple trench, and it was a whole series of holes. It was not just a simple, very deep ditch. They had tunnels going from one trench to another. They had literally bedroom areas flushed out. There were specific trenches for you to go to the bathroom in. So it was a very specific way of doing battle. Technology had a big impact on the war. You've had the first automated machine guns, you had the first poison gas used in warfare, and gas masks. You can see from these photos, this is an automatic machine gun, and all of them are wearing the gas masks to try to protect themselves from the poisonous gases that were used. You had the first tanks, airplanes, and submarines used in World War I. Most of the airplanes were used just for aerial shots, photography, dropping in supplies. It wasn't until later in World War I, near the end, that they started using them with the machine guns attached to them. World War I was a total war. It meant it got not only fought on the battlefield, but it was also fought on the home front. People, all the nation's resources went into the war. People recycled. People watched what they ate. They grew gardens. Everyone helped. The women became nurses. If you couldn't fight in the war, you found different ways to support it. It was every day of your life during World War I. You were reminded you were at war. And because of the draft, everybody knew somebody in the war. Either your father went, your brother went, your boyfriend went, your fiance, your husband, your uncle. Everybody knew somebody who went to war, who decided to join in the Army, the Navy, whatever it was, and help with the war. Governments use the press to print propaganda, which propaganda is a way of spreading the ideas to promote a cause or to damage somebody else or the opposing cause, the enemy. And you can see here some classic examples. You've got Destroy This Mad Brute, and looks like King Kong. He is dressed up, though, with a German soldier's hat on his head, and he is taking Lady Liberty for a ride, and they're saying you have to enlist. Here is a British poster, and here you've got a guy wearing the Union Jack, the British flag, and he's saying, who's absent? Is it you? Meaning, have you signed up yet? If you were a healthy male, why are you not fighting in the war? Why haven't you joined the army? So there were several turning points in the war. One of the big ones is when the U.S. joined World War I. We stayed out of it for many years. We eventually entered it because the Germans submarines attacked ships on the Atlantic, and one of those ships had U.S. tourists, travelers on it. Everyone was killed, and we got involved in the war. The Germans had said, anybody who's in the Atlantic Ocean, we don't care who you are, we're blowing you up. And they made good on that promise. They did that. And that's how we got involved. Now, Russia, because of low morale and devastating losses, eventually would leave World War One. They signed a treaty with Germany to leave because they actually started the Russian Revolution, which we'll learn about next. They lost so many men. Morale was so low. They made so many poor decisions on the battlefield that the people of Russia did not want their leader anymore, and there was a massive overhaul. So that was a major turning point for Russia. Ending World War One was difficult. On November 11th in 1918, there an armistice or an agreement to end the fighting was declared. It was on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Today we know this as Veterans Day. It used to be known as Armistice Day, but then they eventually would change it to Veterans Day. So, and we get this day off every year to celebrate our veterans, and this is a huge, huge holiday in Europe. Eventually, the war would end with the Treaty of Versailles, and it was officially signed several years after the armistice. And we'll talk more about the Treaty of Versailles going into World War II, but the treaty was not fair. It blamed Germany for everything, and unfortunately, Germany didn't start it. They definitely were involved, but they didn't start it. But they paid the biggest price, and it was the Treaty of Versailles that would lay the foundation for World War II. Just nobody knew it at the time. As I like to tell you guys, my students, that if you ever have a big house party, mom and dad aren't around, you have a big house party, the most important thing about that party is the cleanup, to make sure you never get caught. Because if you don't clean up after that party right, mom and dad are going to know something went down in that house. They're going to know that you threw a party. The cleanup is the most important thing after wars. And the Treaty of Versailles after World War I was not a good cleanup. It was very bad. And because of that, it laid the groundwork for World War II.